One of the easiest mistakes to make while watching the Testaments is assuming that every commander in Gilead thinks and acts the same way. The show certainly gives us plenty of ruthless figures who follow the regime without hesitation, but every now and then it quietly introduces someone who doesn't fit that mold. Commander Mackenzie is one of those characters. Unlike many of the other commanders, Mackenzie isn't constantly raising his voice or asserting his authority. He often comes across as calm, measured, and even thoughtful. That doesn't necessarily make him a good man. He is still a high-ranking official in Gilead, but it does make him far more complicated than he first appears. The question is whether that complexity is hiding something much bigger. As the season progresses, there are several moments that suggest Commander Mackenzie knows far more about what's happening around him than he lets on. Rather than openly challenging the system, he watches, listens, and chooses his moments carefully. That approach has led many viewers to wonder if he's quietly protecting certain people, or simply waiting for the right time to act. Let's take a closer look. From the beginning, Mackenzie has behaved differently from many of the commanders we meet. He doesn't seem interested in public displays of power. Instead, he often observes situations before speaking. In a society where authority is usually expressed through intimidation, that restraint stands out. One example is the way he interacts with Agnes. Their conversations are noticeably calmer than the interactions she has with most adults in Gilead. He doesn't appear eager to humiliate or frighten her. Instead, he asks questions, listens to her responses, and occasionally reveals small moments of humanity. That doesn't excuse his role within Gilead's system, but it suggests he isn't entirely comfortable with everything happening around him. Another moment worth examining is the chocolate he gives Daisy. At first, it seems like an ordinary gesture. However, the chocolate turns out to have Japanese writing on its wrapper, revealing that it originated from outside Gilead. That detail raises an interesting question. How did a senior commander obtain an imported product from a country that has sanctions against Gilead? There are several possible explanations. The simplest is that senior officials have access to luxury goods unavailable to ordinary citizens. Another possibility is that Mackenzie has connections beyond Gilead's official channels. The series never confirms either explanation, but the moment feels deliberate. It reminds viewers that some of Gilead's leaders operate in a much more complicated world than the average citizen ever sees. Throughout Season 1, Mackenzie also appears to recognize that Agnes is struggling. Rather than constantly forcing her into uncomfortable situations, he occasionally gives her space. His behavior contrasts sharply with characters who view young women only as political assets or future wives. Again, that doesn't mean he's secretly working against Gilead, but it does suggest he sees more than he says. One of the most interesting aspects of his character is what he doesn't do. Television often tells stories through silence just as much as dialogue. Mackenzie rarely rushes into conflicts. He rarely overreacts. And he almost never reveals exactly what he's thinking. That makes him difficult to read. Characters like that often become very important later because they've spent so much time quietly observing everyone else. It's also worth remembering that people in positions of power usually survive by understanding more than they reveal. Commanders are constantly surrounded by political rivalries, shifting alliances, and hidden agendas. Saying too much can be dangerous. Remaining silent can be a survival strategy. This leads to another theory. What if Mackenzie already suspects there are people inside Gilead working against the regime? Season 1 shows increasing signs that resistance is growing. Mayday continues to operate. Aunt Lydia has her own long-term plans. Several younger characters begin questioning the world they've grown up in. It's difficult to imagine that an experienced commander would fail to notice these changes. He may not know every detail, but he could certainly recognize that something is shifting beneath the surface. If that's true, his cautious behavior suddenly makes much more sense. Rather than reacting emotionally, he may simply be waiting to see which direction events unfold before making any significant decisions. There's also the possibility that Mackenzie understands Gilead is becoming increasingly unstable. Throughout both The Handmaid's Tale and the Testaments, one recurring theme is that authoritarian systems often appear strong until internal cracks begin to spread. Falling birth rates, political rivalries, resistance movements, international pressure. All of these problems continue to grow. Someone in Mackenzie's position would almost certainly be aware of those pressures. He may realize that Gilead's greatest threat isn't coming from outside its borders. It's coming from within. That could explain why he sometimes appears less interested in ideology than in maintaining stability. Of course, there's another side to this discussion. It's entirely possible that viewers are reading too much into his quieter personality. Not every reserved character is secretly planning something. Mackenzie may simply be a practical commander who understands that patience often achieves more than aggression. In a government built on fear, remaining calm can actually make someone even more effective. That's one reason his character remains so intriguing. The series gives us just enough information to ask questions without providing easy answers. Looking ahead to a potential second season, Mackenzie could become increasingly important. If political divisions within Gilead continue to grow, experienced commanders will likely be forced to choose where they stand. Some may become even more loyal to the regime. Others may focus only on preserving their own positions. A few might quietly begin questioning whether Gilead can survive at all. Where Mackenzie ultimately falls remains uncertain. What makes his character compelling is precisely that uncertainty. He's not written as an obvious hero. He's not presented as an obvious villain. Instead, he occupies the uncomfortable middle ground that many people in positions of authority often inhabit. Someone trying to navigate a deeply flawed system while protecting his own interests. Whether that eventually leads him to support change or defend the existing order remains one of the more interesting questions the series could explore. For now, one thing seems clear. Commander Mackenzie consistently notices more than he says. He observes carefully, he speaks selectively, and he rarely reveals everything he knows. In a series built around hidden agendas, secret alliances, and quiet resistance, those qualities may become increasingly important as the story continues. If Season 2 expands his role, don't be surprised if some of the small moments from Season 1 suddenly take on new meaning. Sometimes the most important character isn't the one making the loudest speeches. Sometimes it's the one quietly watching everyone else.
One of the biggest unanswered questions heading into the Testament Season 2 is not just whether Daisy can survive Gilead, but whether she will ever reach the point where Gilead attempts to marry her off at all. By the end of Season 1, Daisy has managed to accomplish something almost no outsider has ever done.